Thandi Modise is expected to deliver a keynote address during the celebration of the International Women's Day today. Now, this initiative is a partnership between the CPUT and UN Women. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. Let's take you there live.
That food is available, food is stored. Women's capacity to adapt to climate change is undermined by the ingrained sexist attitudes and gender discrimination that characterize many societies. For example, women have less access than men to land, to credit, to be in decision-making structures and resources that would enhance their capacity to adapt to climate change. Thus, a gender-sensitive response to climate change remains central to any effective and sustainable intervention we might think of. A gendered perspective on climate change calls for women's priorities and needs to be reflected in any of the responses the world might want to come with. Program Director, having acknowledged women, our vulnerability to climate change, we must never make the mistake of seeing us as women as mere victims to climate change. We are also active agents and of adaptation and mitigation. Historically, women have been at the forefront of developing knowledge and skills related to water harvesting and storage, food preservation, and so on. Since the impact of climate change will be placed on the shoulders of women, it therefore stands to reason that the voices of women must increasingly be heard on climate change. Women must be given the space to lead global efforts to combat environmental degradation and global warming. Unfortunately, many climate change policies and programs across the world do not adequately acknowledge the women's vulnerabilities, the needs, and the contribution that women can make as agents of change. As nations prepare for this year's Commission on the Status of Women to be held in New York, I look forward to today's discussions. We must ensure that the voice of the South African civil society is heard during this CSW 66. I am confident that the outcome of today's engagements will constitute a significant contribution to the country's input at the CSW. Now, consistent with this year's International Women's Day theme, we must pay tribute to many women across the globe who are occupying the foremost trenches in protecting our environment and in leading climate change adaptation, mitigation, and response. In this regard, we must honor distinguished women such as Wangari Maathai of Kenya for her relentless struggle to defeat the vicious circles of environmental degradation and poverty. The Green Belt movement, which she founded in 1977, has planted millions of trees across Kenya as part of her efforts to stop deforestation, soil erosion, as well as generating income for many women and their families. She is and remains, even in her death, a proud recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize for her dedication and commitment to the struggle for democracy, for human rights, and for environmental conservation. We salute her for her noble and exceptional contribution to our environment. As we reflect on the threat posed by climate change, we do so mindful of our responsibility to bequeath to our future generations an environment that will continue to be conducive to the sustenance of human life. The earth is our home. We have nowhere to run to. We must therefore do everything possible to protect our earth and our environment. We have a responsibility to do this for the sake of our children who will be inheriting this earth. Now, the monumental threat which is posed by climate change is challenging many of us in the Department of Defense to use our weapons to fight climate change. The citizens of the world who are at the receiving end of this phenomenon are challenging us to plant 1 million trees of life and not 1 million bombs of war. We must utilize every ounce of our energy and every resource at our disposal to defeat the scourge of climate change. The war against climate change requires the discipline, the skills, and the technology that the military is renowned for. Perhaps at this point, Program Director, I can assert firmly that our democratic government has always been conscious about the importance of the environment and the need to preserve it for posterity. We're not newcomers in this battle. The 1996 White Paper on Defense dedicated a section to environmental matters in recognition of the centrality of the environment in sustainable development. In addition, an environmental unit was established within the South African National Defence Force. I was the chairperson of the JSCD and the Portfolio Committee, both of them at the same time, when our country chose this progressive path. Ours is a defense for development. And as you are aware, we continue to get involved in a number of sustainable development initiatives. Recently, we participated in the major repairs of infrastructure and pollution prevention in the Vaal River system. Our engineers continue to build bridges in the rural areas to enable communities to access various amenities and service delivery points. As South Africa, we must also use this International Women's Day as a monument, as a moment to reflect on the progress we have registered on gender equality and women's empowerment since the 1994 democratic breakthrough, and to appreciate the challenges that still beset us. Despite a multiplicity of challenges confronting women in our country, we must also acknowledge that our democracy has registered significant progress in restoring the dignity of women. Through the Constitution and an array of other measures introduced since 1994, the position and the conditions of women of our country has improved. The living conditions of the majority of ordinary women have undergone a significant qualitative change. Women now have access to services and positions that were a dream only a mere 25 years ago. Thanks to the 1994 democratic breakthrough, women now occupy influential positions in government and in civil society. Proof is myself. All those positions would not have been possible if 1994 had not come through. We continue to play important roles in decision-making of this nation. May we continue to do so too. Having said that, however, we remain painfully aware that the struggle for women's emancipation is far from over. While significant strides have been made to empower women and to promote gender equality, we must concede that women still bear a disproportionate burden of the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. The rural profile of South Africa continues to be that of a female-headed household, growing poverty, human rights abuses, and increased gender-based violence, unemployment, and the high prevalence of HIV and AIDS. The more forward we march, the more these scourges increase. Women continue to be marginalized and discriminated against in terms of economic opportunities and in the labor market. Now, for a very progressive country, we need to do something about this. Equal pay for equal work. There is consensus that South Africa has some of the most progressive policies that are aimed at advancing women's empowerment. However, the challenge remains the actual translation of these policies and legal frameworks into implementation. So we must do something about making the voice of women in parliament and in the legislatures and in the communities a little bit stronger to make sure that execution, implementation, and monitoring actually happens. In addition, gender-based violence continues to rob women of the opportunity to become productive citizens. It denies them their constitutional rights. It condemns their lives to a debt of perpetual fear. They are therefore prevented from enjoying the fruits of our freedom and our democracy. We want to see more and more women graduating in the fields of science, engineering, and technology. Democracy has freed women to venture into these fields and to transcend the narrow confines of what is considered traditional female careers. While some small progress is noticeable in this regard, it is desperately too little. This trend must be accelerated through deliberate efforts by government, by the institutions of higher learning, and civil society. Our collective efforts to promote women empowerment and gender equality must be intensified. We owe it to many martyrs who have laid down their lives for an equal and non-sexist society. Program Director, I thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Okay. Thank you very much to our honorable speaker for the day, Madam Thandi Modise, the Minister for Military Veterans, Defense and Military Veterans, a stalwart of the women's movement, someone who we have had an opportunity of learning a lot from in terms of her own activism, even long before she became our Minister of Military Veterans. And it was quite illuminating to see from her how much more we still need to do as a nation. And I think during the course of today's interaction, we'll be able to bring to bear what she said when she spoke about the need to implement, that we have a plethora of policies, a rich tapestry of policies, but we need to implement. And I think throughout our interactions today, we'll be able. People like Minister Modise were not going to be able to carry out the work that they do if they did this alone as unilateral beings. And I think there's a particular acknowledgement and recognition of seeing her not just as an individual, but as part of a collective experience of women who have throughout the decades, starting as far back as I don't even want to speak about the wars of dispossession where women played a very critical role, but just to track it down to the women of August 9, 1956. And I think it is through all the women that Prof. Drake spoke about earlier today that we ought to see her role, because if you see her role just as an individual would have probably missed the point. I will now call upon Ayanda Mvimbi to come and speak to us. In the interests of time, I am not going to read the citation because we saw how the citation went with the previous speaker and being sensitive to the program. So I would not want you to feel that I'm not giving you the honors. We acknowledge you and the accumulation of experience that you bring. Just to say thank you so much once more for being part of us on behalf of UN Women. Thank you.
All right, there we go. Women continue to be marginalized in accessing socio-economic opportunities, and we should use this day, International Women's Day, to reflect on progress made on gender equality. We've seen earlier on the Minister of Defence and Military Veterans and the Chancellor of the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, Thandi Modise, delivering the key address during the celebration of International Women's Day today.